there, everybody. Melissa Wilson here from Fox 26 News. Welcome to Lunch for the Soul. I have an incredible guest to introduce you today who has been through unthinkable things, one after another, but her spirituality just keeps her going. She is a positive light who has a strong message to share with us all. So without further ado, let's bring in Jennifer Berko. Hi, Jen. Welcome to Lunch for the Soul.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm going to make a long story short and then we'll just get right into it. So, you were basically just living life to its fullest. Things were going great. You're a fellow journalist. And then a heart condition struck you and your children like no one should ever have to go through. So, why don't you? I'm going to start by showing a photo of everybody. And you have two beautiful children. So, I'm going to bring up your family photo here. Here we go. And it's been a hard journey. As we take a look at this, we just see a carefree family, not really a care in the world. So let's talk about what happened in January. We'll start with that journey and then we'll go back in time.
Okay.
So you took your child rock climbing. Sounds like a fun thing to do, but things turned out drastically different. What happened?
Yes. So our 16-year-old wanted to go rock climbing and meet up with some friends from sleepaway camp. And we thought that sounds like a fun idea. So we drove him over to the rock climbing gym and we actually walked him in, which was probably terribly embarrassing just to make sure the safety measures were in place because we've had quite a journey up to this point already. And once we felt comfortable and we knew exactly what was going to take place, we let him stay with his friends and we left the gym and we were about 10 minutes away actually looking at cars for his 16th birthday. And we got a call and I didn't recognize the number and I thought, we're not with him, I better answer. And when I did, on the other end of the phone, I heard a man who worked there very nervous to let me know that there had been some sort of accident and that Sammy son was being worked on. And it took a while for me to get the details out of him. He was nervous. I was nervous. But we raced over and within about 10 minutes or less, we got there.
And I'm sure when you hear that, you're thinking rock climbing wall, he fell. Why did the safety harness work? Weren't those thoughts going through your mind? As for me as a mom, that's what I would be thinking, but that wasn't the case.
That wasn't the case, but that was the first thing that I thought of. And so we started asking a lot of questions. Did he fall? Is he breathing? What's happening? What do you mean he's being worked on? What does that mean? Who? And eventually we got some answers, and what came was terrifying. He didn't fall. He wasn't breathing. They didn't know why, and there were paramedics on the scene trying to revive him. So
I literally have chill bumps when I think about that. You drop off your seemingly very healthy, busy son, and they tell you they're performing CPR.
that's right. And so it was a moment of disbelief. I actually think my first words on the phone, because I didn't recognize the number and I didn't know who it was, I think I said, "Is this some sort of a joke?" Like I thought it might be one of, the 16-year-olds thinking it might be funny to play a joke on us, which I know them all very well and they're all good kids and none of them would do that. But I couldn't imagine why my kid was being worked on. And so that was my heart sank. I felt a heat kind of rise up the back of me and over my head, almost like that feeling before you would pass out. And you're just you can't even think, your mind is just elsewhere, trying to get you just want to get to your kid.
Mhm. And this went on for 2 hours, and his heart would come back. It would just fade and go, and finally, they just said, "There's nothing we can do. There's no heartbeat," and they said, "That's it?"
That's right. So they worked on him for a while at the gym and eventually transported him. And just as you said, his heartbeat would come back and they'd lose it. And then when we finally got to the hospital, they were working on him. And eventually they called it and they said, "We're so sorry. We've lost your son. And we've done everything we can." And so they cleared the room to give our family privacy. So my husband and I could basically say goodbye. Um, and it's hard to to even imagine what you would say to say goodbye to your 16-year-old. But we stood over him, and as you can imagine, we were hugging him and kissing him and telling him we were so sorry we couldn't do more to save him. And at some point, I remember saying some sort of a prayer, just that he be taken care of, and that he be at peace, um, and that our family be at peace.
It's truly unfathomable. But then it's been 5 minutes. The doctors have all gone to let you say goodbye. And you see a pulse in his neck?
Yes. So as you know, I was praying and talking to him. My husband's talking to him, or right by his ears, and my husband down. He says, "I think he's trying to take a breath because his all of a sudden we saw his chin move." So our son's just been pronounced, and here we are over him, and we see movement. So my husband yells out to the doctors in the hallway, and they said, "Oh, it's probably just reflexive. You know, that happens sometimes." And then just a minute later, I saw his entire neck turn purple, and I saw his carotid artery just going. And my husband screamed, "There's a pulse." And all of the doctors, just their eyes were huge, and they ran in, the whole team. They could not believe what was happening. And they were able to stabilize him, and get him up to the PICU, the pediatric ICU. But all of the doctors later told us that, you know, these are doctors in the Texas Medical Center. So we're talking about many, many years of experience, all over the world, many of them. And none of them had ever seen anything like that. And we've been told that over and over again by friends who are doctors and people in the community.
It's incredible. And then you've been transferred now to Tier Memorial Hermann in the Texas Medical Center. And I got to visit you there. You're in his room right now because he's inpatient doing rehab. And I think it's only fair in his precious name and who he is to show him healthy as can be. So here he is, and he is hilarious. I love his personality. He is so much fun. And I could tell that every nurse and every doctor in that place adores him, as I'm sure you know. And this is what I think is so cool. He is quite the musician, and they've actually at Tier been able to use that to their advantage. Tell us how they've been helping him with therapy with what he loves the most.
Yes, it's absolutely incredible. Sammy actually has an older friend who's in college right now, becoming a music therapist, and that was the first we had heard about that. And then here, who knew that we all this time later we would land at Tier and be working so closely with them. And the way it works is all of the different therapists work together to make sure that they're all handling the case together. Everybody's clear on how he's doing, you know, say in physical therapy as opposed to speech therapy, and then they'll incorporate something like a music therapy to keep his attention. So, for example, if they are trying to get him to stand for a while because he's lost function of his legs, in order to distract him and encourage him, they'll play music, or they'll allow him to play music while standing or sitting, as you're seeing in the picture. And it just encourages him, and he kind of gets lost in the music and forgets that he's even doing therapy in the first place. There's a lot of laughter and a lot of dancing and singing along. And he is a wonderful musician that plays multiple instruments, most especially drums. So it's been incredibly helpful and encouraging for him to have something that he loves so much help him through this really tough therapy.
I tell you what, it's brilliant that they have come up with that. Like you said, to get his mind off of it, he doesn't even realize he's working.
Mhm.
How have you seen that help him? Because he has had to learn how to do a lot of stuff over again. So you probably feel like you're just going back to his childhood almost, I would think.
Well, the funny thing is, you kind of, I think in the beginning, tiptoe, don't, they're already going through so much.
Yeah.
Want to tip the scales in any one way to upset them or excited.
Hmm.
So we kind of just followed his lead, and he always led us toward just the positivity, the laughter, and getting to know everybody. So his approach the whole time has been just talking to everybody. It doesn't matter if somebody's being wheeled down the hallway and it's an adult
Hmm.
who has a massive head injury, brain injury. He'll say, "Hey, what's up? You're doing great. What's going on? Where are you from?" And he
I love it. Now tell me about this picture and what he's probably thinking
uh,
about here.
Yes. So his goal is to make this wall. So what you're looking at is many of the hallways in Tier have success stories of unbelievable journeys and unbelievable stories of people who have gone through catastrophic injuries and how they made their way back into their lives, and many of them making miraculous recoveries. So he was on the hallway and decided to stop and read this person's story. And I just had to snap the photo because right after that, he said, I'm going to be on this wall, you watch. And that's his goal.
That's what it takes when you're going through such a hard time to set that goal and to make it happen. So what will his picture be? Will he be playing drums or what will he be doing?
I have a feeling he might be playing drums, but
Yeah.
it's up to him. He would definitely be standing doing so or even walking.
Yeah. As long as he's on the wall, I'm sure he doesn't care. All right, now we're going to get to a tough part of this. Let's talk about your youngest son. I'm going to bring up a picture. And this is a really tough part of the journey. And I applaud you for being able to talk about it. So, you thought for a while that he had epilepsy. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So Frankie was 10 years old, and when he was about 9, he had a TBI, or traumatic brain injury, from an accident at an indoor play place, and he made a full recovery from that and later had another TBI, and both were related to having seizures. One kind of caused him to go into a seizure, while another, and I should say two others, he went into the seizure that caused the issue. And he had catastrophic injuries. In the second one, he had fallen from a diving board. We didn't know at the time that he had epilepsy, and he went up on a diving board. It was a high dive, and he fell 10 feet onto his head because he had gone into a seizure at the moment that he got to the top of the diving board. My husband and I went running, and my husband barely caught his foot. And I don't know how, but made nearly a complete recovery from that. But what came out of it was that they diagnosed him with epilepsy. And once he was diagnosed with epilepsy, we felt, okay, now we know what's going on. We understand, thank goodness that he's made it to this point. And he was immediately put on medication. And after that, we relaxed a little bit, but I remember still feeling very nervous. What would happen if he had another seizure? How could we protect him? So we put a lot of precautions in place. Unfortunately, sometime after, at 10 years old, he came home from the most wonderful day at school. I can't even tell you. He had the best day, made sure to talk to everybody that day, very similar to Sammy in that way. And he came home and had a seizure when he was upstairs, and yelled for us because he felt it coming on. They refer to that as an aura. And he did not wake up from that seizure. His heart stopped, and he stopped breathing, and we could not understand why. Because typically with a seizure, you that might happen momentarily, but generally you get through the seizure. So it's a moment in time, and then you come out of it. But he just could not come out of it, and then they could not get his heart going, and it never added up to me. In the end, they did an autopsy and came back and said that it was deemed SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And it still didn't sit right with us after that, because essentially that's a diagnosis that comes when you've looked at everything else and there was nothing else wrong. You couldn't find anything else. And because you knew he had epilepsy and he had a seizure at the time, then it becomes sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And for 3.5 years, we kept going through it and searching and asking questions, and could not come up with an answer. I even became very involved with the Epilepsy Foundation in the process. And now here we are all this time later, and Sammy has this incident. He goes into a cardiac arrest. And once he was stabilized, they said, you know what? 16-year-olds, not only do they not go into cardiac arrest, but when they do, they don't go into ventricular, um, the VTAC, I think is what I
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
did. And then they said that only happens in certain rare heart diseases. So at that point, they decided to run a genetic panel, a very specific genetic heart panel.
And they had kept it from your son, right? So they had that material?
Yeah. Oh, yes. And so Frankie, before he passed, they had started to enter him into a study they were doing on epilepsy. So they had some of his genetic material, and very thankfully, they had held on to it. So when they decided to do this genetic testing, they did it on Sammy, and then they said, well, naturally, we'll also do it on Sammy's
Mhm.
mother and father. And
Mhm.
you know what? I think we have Frankie's materials as well. So they gathered up all of our materials and sent them off. And what came back was that Sammy, Frankie, and I all have a very rare heart disease. And it's called catecholaminergic, let's see, polymorphic ventricular tachycardia, CPVT for short. And I was shocked. I was shocked because I have lived to 45 years of age and never had a cardiac arrest or any other major heart issues.
Mhm.
Sammy has always been very healthy. However, what we learned about Frankie was fascinating and is now being used in medical studies and medical papers that are being written. What we learned was there is a close correlation between seizures and CPVT. So the seizure was actually a symptom. So it really makes me want to make people aware of the fact that sometimes it's not the first diagnosis you get, or maybe
Mhm.
second, but as
Mhm.
you may find out more. And my hope is that there'll be better communication, say,
Mhm.
um, neurology and cardiology, because so many times a seizure is a symptom rather than a last diagnosis.
So almost finding the root of the cause, if it's possible to do that, which sometimes it can be really hard. And you are such a strong mom to be able to talk about this. I know it's raw, it hurts. And to be able to look at him and leave his memory alive. And you got to tell us about his hair. It is so adorable. Is there a story behind this?
Of course, there's a story behind it.
Do
Uh,
tell.
so Frankie, I always speak in first person, and not to confuse anybody, but I do feel like he very much is still with us. And
Mhm.
I don't know how anybody watching this will feel, but what I can say is that we definitely get many signs from him. And for a long time, I thought that it was me doing it, that somehow I was making it happen. But we've learned over the last 3 years that he truly is still here. So I'm going to speak about him in first person,
I
but
love it. You go for it.
but basically Frankie has a very lively personality, and very similar to mine, can't stop moving, very outgoing. And when it would come time to go to sleepaway camp, he was so excited. And it became a thing, where kids started dyeing their hair, and he
Mhm.
just do it for camp, mom. Can I do it for camp? And I said, I'll do it for you. And he loved to wear his hair in this kind of like faux hawk, like a mohawk.
Uh-huh.
And so I said, well, we'll just dye the mohawk. And so his favorite color is red, and red and hot pink. And so he insisted that it be bright red. And that's what we did. And every summer it got a little more and a little more. And then we would let it stay till the school year started. And then we'd, trim it up for school to be appropriate. So when he passed, um, I thought about it so much. And I remember at one point, the grandparents, my parents going, oh, I can't believe
Mhm.
I do this. They're kind of old school. And,
Mhm.
but you have to talk to him about it, and you will see that it is him. He feels more himself when he's able to express himself with this hair dye. Who I am, world, So
It's just I love your attitude and being able to talk about him, and I see the life and the love in your eyes, and it's very touching from one mom to another. but I think about, I just almost break down in tears because I have a 15-year-old right now, and this happened to both of your boys, both of them, when you were shopping for a car, which is what I'm doing right now, and from my child, and it's just unfathomable. How have you worked through all that you've been through, now being able to see your child flourish every day, hopefully go home perhaps very soon? How have you gotten through it?
I think that there is just something inside of me where I have always been very positive. I don't do it on purpose, but I'm very optimistic. I always feel like there has to be an answer. There has to be a way to work things out. There has to be a way to come together. And my kids now give me that strength to continue to be so positive and optimistic. And Sammy more than ever. When we lost Frankie,
Oh no.
it will never be right again. Um, but I just remember Sammy being there right after we lost him and had his arms around both of us, and all of our friends and family kept saying,
Oh, I'm sorry that we're losing her right now.
hey,
She's
because,
a, oh, there you go.
sorry,
Finish that last thought. I'm sorry. I know you're in the Texas Medical Center and this
yeah,
signal is tough. Go
yeah.
ahead. It's a special thought.
So it's Sammy who carries me through, very honestly. He is so very positive, and he says things, the way he expresses about Frankie. He'll say things like, I miss him and I love him, but there is nothing I can do to bring him back. And so I have to live my best life. I have to live every day to the fullest. And he truly, truly does. And it's really touching because Frankie is a child who would fall into bed at the end of the day. He lived every second so full of energy that he literally had nothing left to give at the end of the day but to fall into bed. He loved life. He loved people so much. And, people after he passed would say, live like Frankie. And it became a really like catchphrase that everybody around us knew what that meant. It meant don't let 1 second pass that you haven't lived it to the fullest, because
Mhm.
he may have only lived 10 years, but he lived such a full life in 10
Yeah.
years. You know?
You're again so strong to even be able to go there. So thank you for blessing us with your story. Now I want to make sure that people know it's going to take a lot of rehab. He's about to be released. He's been there for months,
Yeah.
and medical insurance only covers so much. And so how can we as a community help you?
Oh gosh, thank you for asking that question. The community has been so supportive and wonderful. And one of the things that has been set up is a GoFundMe page, because when Sammy comes home, he will be in a much better state than he was, but he has years of therapy ahead of him, and things like wheelchairs and stair lifts and just things you wouldn't think about, having to make everything ADA compliant and accessible to it.
Including a vehicle, I would think. He's of driving age now. Now, how do we find your GoFundMe?
So you can go to GoFundMe and then search Sammy Berko, and you will be able to, hook into it that way. We also have a Caring Bridge where we have some of this information available. And if you go to Caring Bridge and search again his name, you can get on there and find the information as well. And we appreciate any and all the support we can get as we, continue to rehab him and try and get him as healthy as possible.
And then how are you staying healthy through all of this? How are you making sure that this doesn't ever happen to you?
So I'm going through some of the same steps as Sammy, although for me it's a little bit different because I haven't had a cardiac arrest. And so there are things like medications that they'll all be put on, stress tests I'm going through. And it's a team of doctors that are following our family to make sure that we're treated appropriately. I think the scariest thing is that it is such a rare heart condition that there are many things that are still controversial and unknown. It was only first discovered in the late 90s, and so it's a relatively new
Mhm.
disease and something that, there's not just one way to treat it.
Mhm.
The best way to say that.
Well, Jennifer, I just want to say that again, from one mom to another, hang in there, keep up the spirituality that keeps you lifted up. It was an honor to meet your husband and see how he's just stepping up to the plate to be the man of the house and make sure you're all taken care of. And you just have a lovely family. And I wish you all my very best.
Thank you so much. And I would just say to everybody out there that we none of us know what's beyond us, but keeping into your spirituality and believing, I think, takes you a very long way. And we believe that is what brought Sammy back, his zest for life and his spirituality.
Oh, I'm so happy he's here and will be for many years to come to keep you on your feet. All right, Jennifer, thank you and take care of yourself.
You, same to you.
All right. And for all of you who may have joined us a little bit late and you say, hey, I want to see all of this, it's okay. Go to Fox 26's YouTube page. You can see this in its entirety as well as all of my Lunch for the Souls. It's a blessing to have you here with us today, and I hope to see you back here, same place, same time. Have a good one.